It's always wonderful to welcome Oliver Wakeman onto the Yes Music podcast. Hello, Oliver.
Oh, good afternoon, good evening. Well, I never know how to answer that. Because you never know what time anybody's listening to it. I've just got to get used to saying hello as opposed to whatever time we record it. Hello, everybody.
Excellent. And Mark is here as well. Hello, Mark.
Hello there, Kevin. Hello, Oliver. How you doing?
I'm good.
Excellent. So we're here to talk about your Collaborations box set, which has recently released, and we actually spoke to you a little bit about it the last time you came on the show. But before that, we'd like to pick your brains a little bit about Yes, of course. Mm-hmm. And as a Yes fan, Oliver, because principally that's what you are, even though you played with the band, you are a Yes fan at heart. What do you think of Yes's decision to replace Relayer with Close to the Edge on tour?
Oh, you're going to get me into trouble, aren't you?
No.
What do I think? Well, obviously, I don't know the reasons as to why they've done it.
No.
So I can't, I don't know what the reasonings are behind it. I think a lot of fans were looking forward to seeing Relayer because I don't think it's been played as much as Close to the Edge has. And I know that the tours they do at the moment, they sort of call them the album series, don't they?
Yeah.
The thing that I remember when I was with the band is that we actually, in the show that we did, we played all of Fragile and all of Close to the Edge, and a load of other stuff as well. So I suppose it's just a different way of promoting the tour, really. But I suppose as part of my things, I always sort of thought to myself, well, we used to play that all the time. So, but Close to the Edge, it's still a great record, isn't it? It's one of the great records of all time. I just don't know whether people would be a little disappointed if they were looking forward to going to seeing Relayer and they see Close to the Edge again. But it's a tricky one, isn't it, really? Yeah. I mean, that's all I can say is that people that probably bought the tickets to go and see Relayer because they'd heard Close to the Edge a lot of times might be a little upset, whereas the people that maybe weren't so keen on the direction that it took with Relayer maybe happy to see Close to the Edge there. There we go. How about that?
That's a very politically correct sort of answer. Very, very well done, Oliver.
Thank you.
I think it's well done. So you mentioned that you've played Close to the Edge on tour with Yes. So you know exactly what's involved with the playing of the songs and stuff like that. But would you say then that maybe Gates and Sound Chaser are actually maybe a bit more difficult to play as a band?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think really because Patrick is a different style of player, again, to the way that Dad plays. And I mean, I haven't played a lot of Patrick's stuff. I think we only ever did Soon on the tour when I was in the band. So I only sort of really got to play his sort of pad section. I didn't really get to play any of his sort of clever stuff. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. And I was delighted to meet him, actually. He came to a couple of shows when we were touring, which was lovely. And it's such a difficult one to answer, really, as to... I have this big thing when I talk about musicians, which is that the trouble is with progressive music sometimes is that it's always about who does what and who does this the fastest and does that. And I sort of always try to describe musicians in a slightly different way. I was having a conversation with my son the other day about it, and I said, being a musician is a bit like, my dad always used to call it an apprenticeship. It's a lifelong apprenticeship. And basically, he used to, people used to say to me, oh, they're better than me, or this person's better at doing that. And I always sort of think of music as a bit like a tree. You start up at the trunk, and we all start at the beginning going, oh, what's an A, what's a D? And then slowly we branch off into a little section which we find interesting, and then we learn. And then we end up somewhere on this tree right at the end of a branch. And someone else has taken a completely different route and ended up on another branch. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that someone's a better player. It just means that they're different. They've taken a different approach to things. And I think that makes it difficult sometimes, particularly with progressive music, because people are always looking to compare, players, which I kind of get. And, I do get it. And to be honest with you, it's kind of what inspires me to sit down and do scales and practice and keep my dexterity up, because I want to be able to play to that level that people expect of me and, potentially around the Wakeman name. But as to whether that is a deciding factor on how Yes approach a tour, I really find it difficult to answer, because I don't really like to say,
he's better than this person.
I mean, all I know is when I was in the band, I worked hard to make sure I learnt all the parts that were played by all the different keyboard players and played them as accurately as I could. But then that was something that I brought to the band, which was, you know, maybe some of the authenticity of going back to the original solos and things. That's what I tried to do. So it's a very difficult question to answer, because I know a lot of Yes fans will be, you know, utterly passionate about their opinion, because I get emails from people all the time saying, oh, this, that, you know, and I take everybody's points of view on board, but I have always tried very hard to not get too involved in the politics of things, because it's you can easily back yourself into a corner.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that people tend to forget, though, is that not everybody has the same influences growing up, the same sort of inspirations when they come to writing music and stuff like that. So we can't all be the same sort of skill set, because we learn different things as we grow up, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that the casual listener may not have in mind when they think of these things. Oh, this guy might be better than this guy. It's not that. It's just that maybe Patrick listened to more fusion and jazz, whereas the other person may have listened to more rock music and, you know, classical, right? So they have different influences, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I think that's a very, very important point that you make about your dad, actually, because he, absolutely, he seems to be learning all the time. He seems to be, you know, he just plays so much, and you know, on his Twitter feed, he talks about the rehearsals he's doing, the way he's living with his piano and playing his keyboards constantly, and but always learning and always open to new things. And I think that's really important. And it sounds to me like you, Oliver, are of the same sort of mindset as that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I sit down and sit at the piano, and it's like, you know, I listen to other players, I listen to other music, and it's, you know, how do they do that? What have they done there? Why have they taken that approach? I find it fascinating. Music is just fascinating to me. But I've never been the sort of player that just sits down and just, let me put this a slightly different way. I think nowadays it's slightly harder but easier for new musicians, because they can get hold of everything on YouTube, and they can watch somebody playing it.
Yes.
And they can copy all the notes, and they write it all down, and they know what it is. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a fantastic tool for people to be able to learn, which is great. When I grew up, it was a lot of putting a CD on or putting a record on and picking up the needle and putting it back and going, what are they playing there? What is that? How? And you just slowly work it. And, you know, in a strange way, I still do that with my own records. I go, when I've got to learn something, I had to learn something the other day for a bit of a video shoot. And I was trying to work out the solo I did, because I'd done this solo, and it was obviously a one-take solo, completely unedited, but it just captured the moment beautifully. Yeah. But when I looked at the MIDI, it was in a nicer sense, it was a mess, because it was so naturally performed that you couldn't sit down and write it out and go, okay, that's what it was. I had to just sort of sit there and learn it by listening to it. And I thought, God, I'm getting older now, and I'm still having to sit down and listen and learn my own pieces. You know, and you sort of look back and you go, God, how did you come up with that? How did that happen? And you realise that, you know, you can learn from pieces that you've done yourself in the past. Yeah. But I think I keep saying to my son, you know, sits down and says, oh, look, I've learned this, I've done this. And he's turning into a good little player. But he says, what do you reckon? And I said, find a bass player, find a drummer, find a guitarist, get into your music room at school and just play together. And find a track you want to learn and sit down and learn it and work it out together. That's a great way to learn, rather than just sitting and looking at YouTube, because it's a bit like the old days of just doing classical lessons or playing live. I did my classical lessons, but I've always maintained that, you know, going out and playing with live bands and putting myself in maybe uncomfortable situations of playing in with bands that were very, very good and having to really, you know, learn quickly was just as valuable music training as sitting in front of a piano teacher.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I mean, you said there that you had to relearn a piece of your own. And of course, some of your pieces, some of your works are quite long. And I do have a question about long form pieces. Yes, music or any other piece which is long. What is it about learning that which is hard? Is it just about remembering all the twists and turns, or is there more to it?
I think with the Yes pieces, if I start with the long Yes pieces, and I'll always go to Heart of the Sunrise because it's one of my favourite Yes pieces. I always think it's just such a brilliantly arranged piece of music. The difficulty with Heart of the Sunrise wasn't so much the parts to play, it was remembering the order of everything, because It has those sections where it is the same part, but there's a different part shoved in between. And I always remember live, I always used to have a little cheat sheet on the underneath the piano where I just looked at it and went, right, done the first one. Second time round, don't forget to go to this bit. And I had to do it because if you get lost in the moment, sometimes you can go, hang on, am I on the first time or the second time? You have to, that's the harder bit with long pieces of music.
Yes.
And the same with some of my own pieces, sometimes it's the complexity that you're trying to remember. Sometimes it's the interaction with another musician. Maybe for my own pieces, it's not quite so difficult because I write them. So I sort of remember where I'm going, and I'm obviously a lot more in tune with what the lyrics are doing as well, because I'm a lot more aware of what I wrote and how the song is developing. But I think Yes had this, particularly around the Fragile sort of time of doing that sort of little jumps between little sections on and off, which was very challenging, good fun. But on the counter side of that is with the same as Heart of the Sunrise. When you get it really right, it's a very satisfying feeling when you get to the end of the song and you sort of go, yeah, we nailed that one.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Heart of the Sunrise because I'm not sure if you've seen that documentary called Sounding Out on the BBC from 71, I think, or something. And your father was actually talking about something very similar where he had been playing a gig with the band and he was relatively new still with them. And they were playing Heart of the Sunrise and they came to that section where it stops and he goes to that piano bit, and he had forgotten that part had come up. And he said it felt like 1,000 years before he figured out to jump into that part again and do it. So it's interesting that you bring up like the remembering part of it because your father brought up the exact same sort of story.
Oh, really? No, I don't think I have seen that. It's true though, and I think you are. It can catch you unawares sometimes because the thing is when you're playing on stage, and this is I'm sorry, I keep referring to my son here a lot because he does talk to me a lot about music. And I always explain to him, he had to do his first show at school the other day. They played a song. And he sort of said, I'm rehearsing it. He said, I think I've got it now. I said, okay, well, keep rehearsing. And he said, but I've got it. And he said, no, you need to go about 25% more than you think. Because when you're on stage, you won't be able to hear things as clearly. Something might go wrong. A wire might be cutting out. Something might be happening. Someone distracts you. You need to have it almost so well known in your head that you can react to those distractions. And I can distinctly remember when I did the show with Dad. One of the few times we played together, he asked me to do King Arthur with him at the O2.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember walking up on stage. We only did one show. I remember really looking forward to it. And I walked up to my keyboard rig and we started the first track and I hit the keys and my monitors started to crackle. And I was like, what is going on? I couldn't hear anything I was playing. It kept cutting in and out, cutting in and out, cutting in and out. And I was thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I'm looking at my keyboard tech going, what's wrong? And he was walking around all the wires trying to work it out, what's going on. And it turns out somebody behind had rested a pint of beer on top of the monitor. And then it had fallen over. And of course, it was shorting the monitor. So I'm there in the O2. We're doing a one-off performance.
Yeah.
And I can't hear anything I'm playing. And there's I don't know how many people were in the orchestra, 40, 50 people in the orchestra and a choir and a narrator.
Yes.
And you're sort of going, I can't hear anything.
No,
and I always explain that to my son. So I say, it's only by being prepared, having my notes, having gone through it over and over again to get myself extra prepared, was I had the mental capacity to look at the tech and go, look behind me, look at the wires, check this, check that. And then he found the problem. He says, I've got it, get going. And I think that's really important as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So before we go on to your box set, we have one last question regarding Yes and stuff like that. If you were given the chance to play live with the band again, what one obscure song would you love to have a go at and why?
Holy Lamb. There you go.
Hey! It's a great answer.
Yeah, I was. There's a story behind it. Actually, I have this weird thing, which is where everybody goes Yes, give everybody their top 10, 20 Yes albums, and the majority of the time, the two albums that I really like won't be in the top 10. And I will really like Tomato, as you know, Kevin.
Yes.
And I always liked Big Generator. And I know a lot of people have problems with it. But I don't know whether it was because that was a period of my life when I was just getting into it. 90125 had come out. Some of my friends knew it. But Big Generator just came out. And I picked it up and I really enjoyed it. I loved all the low-end bass, all the stuff that Chris detuned to get all that stuff in.
Yes.
I thought some of the songs were great. I liked the production on it. slightly sacrilege here because 90125 is a superbly produced album.
Yes.
But 90125 just had a bit of an edge of a bit more anger to it, whereas 90125 was so clean cut. You know, some of the stuff on Big Generator was great, but right at the end of the record, you had this lovely little classic John melody and that lovely keyboard solo. And I remember thinking, and I've always loved that song. And I always loved listening to the guitars. It's one of the first things I listened to it and thinking, what's going on there with the guitar? There's 2 acoustic guitars. And it was just double tracking acoustic guitar. And I always remember listening to that going, it's really interesting. And when I joined the band, John and I spent a lot of time talking, which maybe a lot of people don't know. We spent an awful lot of time talking about the tour on the phone and what we were going to play. And he said, I want to do an acoustic section in the middle and just do some songs just on the piano and the voice. And, you know, he talked about doing the track The Garden from which was going to be on the Living Tree. Well, I think came out on the Living Tree. And so that was one of the ones he wanted to do. And he said, what would you like to play? And I said, I'd really like to do Holy Lamb. And he was like, that'd be great just on a piano and voice. And unfortunately, it never happened. So it's not that traditional Yes song where I just, maybe people are thinking I would just choose one with the fastest solo or the bit where you show off most. But I think Holy Lamb's just a beautiful song. It's really well structured. It's as long as it needs to be. And the keyboard solo is beautifully melodic. And I've always sort of thought, I quite fancy having a go at that one.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, I don't think it's a desperately popular song amongst many Yes fans, but I like it a lot. And the way it's recorded on Big Generator, I think it's got a wonderful kind of build in it when it starts off very, very simply and ends up as a huge piece. So that's fascinating. So thank you very much.
I think everybody listens to my answers and just goes, what's going on with this bloke? Has he ever listened to Yes records?
Excellent. So we'll go on to your latest release, the box set Collaborations. And as I said earlier, we did speak a little bit about it before it was released last time, but it's definitely out now. So can you just remind those who don't know already what's included in the set?
Yeah, it's actually out on the 11th of April, so a week and a bit to go.
It's still to come. Right. To come.
It's available. It's available now to pre-order, and then it will get shipped out.
Yes.
It's basically, obviously, anybody that's listened to the show have known about the From a Page box set, and I would imagine that they're big avid Yes fans will know about that project. When that finished, the management company who I work with as well, the Yes management company, they said, have you got anything else? And I did the box set of the records I did with Clive Nolan, which we talked about, which was the Tales by Gaslight. And the same thing happened again, that they said, that went well, and I think, they sold out or they're nearly all gone. And they came to me and said, what next? And I sort of thought, actually, I've got a little bit of a process now. Each year I can put something together from my catalogue. And the thing is that a lot of musicians have is over the years, their catalogue becomes a bit disparate. It gets moved all over the place. Different people sign things up. You get a different version. Some people even take albums, give it a completely different title and re-release it and all that sort of stuff. And I've sort of, I'm one of those sort of people that likes a bit of order to my catalogue. Not maybe chronological order, but I like the ordering of having a clear catalogue of what I've done. So I just very distinctly split my work into work that I've done, the collaborative projects, and the sessions that I do for people. And I was sort of looking at these works, and I sort of thought, right, okay, what have I got next? And I've got my solo albums, the piano records, the New Age records I did, the ones with Steve, Gordon. And I was thinking, well, what works next? And I was sort of thinking, okay. And then somebody else having a conversation with somebody, I think it was around Peter Banks, and somebody said, you play with Peter and Steve Howe, haven't you? And I actually went, well, I play with Trevor as well, actually, because he joined us in Los Angeles to play at the Greek. So, I'm actually one of the few people probably in Yes that's played with all three of them.
All three?
And then somebody else said, have you played with anyone? And I said, yeah, Gordon Giltrap. And I suddenly thought, actually, maybe there's an album, a box set there about, rather than, I was originally for a long time, it was called Guitarists, the box set. And then I sort of thought, that explains what it is. But if somebody doesn't know me, it will look a little bit odd because I'm not a guitarist, not to the level of those two anyway. But then I sort of thought, well, what are they? And even though Steve's album was, me with Steve, and the one with Gordon was very much me and Gordon. Yes. There was so much interaction and the collaborative spirit on those two records. I sort of thought, actually, collaborations, that's quite a nice idea. And so that's where it came from. And I was sort of really toying with that idea when, rather fortuitously, a sound engineer friend of mine that engineered one of the shows that we did where Paul Manzi joined us, which was, he only ever did 2 solo shows with us. They recorded it as a full multi-track. And he said, do you want the files? I've got the files. And I was like, brilliant. So I went through it and realised that there was enough material on there from our back catalogue, Gordon and I's back catalogue, that wasn't just repetition from the album Ravens and Lullabies, that there could be a live album there. So I went through it, sorted it all out. And I went to Carl Groom again, who did the mixing for From a Page and all my other records. And we mixed this lovely little acoustic record. And I sort of thought, God, there we go. That's a lovely box set. Because, of course, the management company always say, OK, you've got 2 records there. That's great. Got anything else we can put in there that's unusual, that is different? And so that's where that one came from. So the albums are very different, actually. In fact, I think next Tuesday, I'm just going to drop on my YouTube channel a teaser which sort of goes through some of the music from all the records so people can actually have a listen. So there'll be a release on that on Tuesday. But they are quite different records. 3 Ages of Magic with Steve Howe I always refer to it as my sort of trying to do an album in the same way they would have done it in the 70s, which is just, completely freeform, completely ridiculous. I could do whatever I wanted, use whatever musicians I wanted. Whereas Ravens and Lullabies, as we talked about before, was more of a band project with a defined cast. For example, 3 Ages of Magic really started, which is probably the bit that I should probably explain to your Yes fans.
Yeah.
Steve and I got to know each other very well on the ABWH tour around America. When they got ill, when Tony Levin got ill, and they had to cancel a load of shows, they jumped into a studio to record I'm Alive, to do the single version from the track I'm Alive from the song Quartet from ABWH. Yeah. And I remember sitting in the studio to go and watch those recordings, and Steve was sat there with his little, I think it was a Steinberger guitar, the little, you'll know, Mark, the little blue ones with no head on the end, the necklace ones, and or the headless guitars. And he was doing all the guitar parts of that. And I spent a long time chatting to him as he was going through all these parts. And I remember looking over his shoulder and I could see Dylan in the background talking to Bill Bruford. And I sort of thought, this is a bit weird, isn't it? I'm here sat talking to Steve, and the Steve son's over there talking to Bill. It was a bit of an odd moment. But Steve gave me an awful lot of time, and, we talked a lot. And then I didn't see him for many years. And he lived down in Devon where my mum lived. And one day I was hitchhiking from where I lived up in London down to see my mum. And a friend of mine had given me a train ticket that got me as far as Tiverton, which was about halfway. And I remember getting off the train and walking onto the platform, and there was Steve Howe on the platform. And I walked over to him and I said, "Hello, Steve, it's Oliver, Rick's son." And he went, "Yeah, of course, Oliver, how are you?" And I said, "I'm fine, I'm going to see my mum." He said, "Oh, jump in the car." He said, I think he was picking up Dylan. He said, "I'm picking up Dylan. Jump in the car, I'll give you a lift as far as, my house, and then if they'll come and pick you up." Yeah. And we just got chatting, and he said, "Oh, here's my number. We must keep in touch." And I thought he did the usual thing about it's really kind. And then a bit later, another couple of years later, I was doing a radio show and I'd met him to do an interview with him. And then another time I released my first record, and I was in the local town, and I was just going into the record shop, and the record shop were friends of mine, and they put a poster of my first record in the window. And I was stood in front of the poster just sort of looking at it. And then suddenly I hear this voice that says, "Hello, Oliver." And I turn around and it's Steve. And I went, "Hello, Steve." And he went, "Hi, what have you been up to?" And I sort of moved to one side and pointed at the poster. And he went, "Oh, really? Have you got a copy?" And so I went into the shop and got him a copy. And he said, "Oh, I'll have a listen. I'll give you a call." And I sort of thought, he won't. Yeah. He'll take it home. And it'll be a nice coaster, And then a couple of days later, he phoned me up, and I was like, "Oh, hi, Steve." He said, "Oh, okay, yeah." He said, "I had to listen to your record," and I was expecting him to say, "Yeah, very nice, nice record." And he said, "Okay, I've made some notes. Have you got an hour?" And I went, "Okay." And he went, "Right, track 1. Really like the use of flutes there and the way that it changed with the expression." And he went through the whole album talking about all the bits that he really liked and how, and he was saying, "Maybe that bit could have been done there. I was always expecting you to do a little bit something there." And then he just invited me over, and I used to regularly just go over to his house, and we just used to chat. And eventually we got to this point where we talked about doing a record together, but then his diary got so full up of related stuff that he said, "Look, just bring me music and I'll have a listen to it, and we'll just talk through the music." And that's really how the project developed. And then, so we just used to get together. I used to play him pieces of music, and he'd say, "Have you thought about doing this here? Have you thought about that?" And then eventually it got to the point he said, "Look, I think I'd like to play guitar on this." And we just ended up in this sort of routine of actually really working the music and really making sure that the arrangements were as good as they can be, and thinking about where we could put guitar and what other instruments we could bring in. And then we went into this studio in the middle of a farm, in the middle of Cornwall, which was just a little studio room in the middle of this massive barn. And I had the keyboard rig to die for. I had a Hammond organ with the Leslie speaker in the middle of this massive, great barn. And just sat there and recorded it. And I remember Steve turning up and he did the big classical guitar solo section from the end of the record in there. It was just lovely. I have such strong memories of that record. My memory is terrible, but I have really strong memories of that whole recording process. It was great.
Yeah, so we did an episode some time ago about Ravens and Lullabies, which me and Kevin love quite a bit. We also spoke to Stephen Lamb, who we know was involved in the tour you did.
Ah, yes.
And as you said, from a stage CD in the box it is unreleased live recordings. Did you find that a lot of the album worked live, or were some of the songs not suitable for live interpretation?
Well, the way the album is structured, Ravens and Lullabies, there's... again, everything relates back to Yes around that record because I just finished with Yes. And I think we talked about it last time. The idea of doing Ravens and Lullabies was that it was songs interdispersed with duets.
Yes.
Which was a way of giving the album a flow, which was something Steve and I had talked about when we were working on the record that they ended up doing as Fly From Here. So the Ravens record, the Ravens songs were the songs that had a harder edge to them or a lyrical message. And the lullabies were the acoustic pieces. So when Gordon and I went out and toured, we generally focused on the lullaby pieces because those were the pieces that we could play accurately to the record. But then we did a full band tour where I think it was actually Stephen was the instigator of us doing the very first show where we headlined at one of his festivals. Yeah. And, we did the show with the full band where we played the rock songs and then did the acoustic bit in the middle. So that was one of the advantages of that record. It gave us an opportunity to actually play things accurately from the record without feeling that we were doing an acoustic sort of light version of the rock songs, as it were. But when Paul came along, it gave us the opportunity of doing some of the lighter Ravens pieces, as it were. And the other thing about that record was something my dad always used to say to me. When I was a kid, I used to say to him, "Why'd you talk so much on stage, Dad?" and he used to say, he always said to me, he said, the thing is, he said, the music that we play is quite complicated, the band. He said, in his solo stuff, he said, it's quite complicated. Yeah. And he said, and when you stop, if you just go straight into the next piece of music, people almost haven't had a chance to absorb the music, think about it as a piece, relax. He said, I tell a story because it's almost like a bit of a cleansing of the palate to prepare people for the next piece of music. Yeah. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. And that's always stayed with me whenever I've done shows. So I've always talked to the audience. And it actually felt a bit like that with the record. You do a song that's got maybe a lyrical hard edge to it, or is trying to tell a story or trying to get a message across. And then you want to just bring the audience, the listener, not down. You want to soothe them a little bit before you hit them with another song about something else that that you'd like them to listen to. And so that was the approach for that record. So multiple ways of doing it. But to answer your original question, it was, we did manage to play all of the record. It just took 3 different types of tour to be able to do it.
I just wanted to ask you quickly about the bonus tracks, particularly for Ravens and Lullabies that you've got on this set. So the first one there, Preludium, from the Well-Tempered Clavier, so that's a classical piece. That's
a Bach piece. Basically, I did that a long time ago. It was just one of my little pieces I used to just play and practice. Yeah. And it was one of the sort of pieces that you start playing and you start playing it faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And when Gordon and I first went out on tour, we were looking for songs to put into the set. And obviously, when you're just playing your own music, sometimes it can be challenging is the wrong word. Sometimes it can be a little unsafe is the wrong word as well, because you're still having to concentrate, but you are doing something that you wrote yourself. Yeah. And I said to Gordon, wouldn't it be nice to do something that was just a bit challenging? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I did it. I learned this piece years ago. And I had to dust out the score. And I said, wouldn't it be nice if we sort of rearrange this? And to be honest, part of it was a bit of a challenge for me to have a bit of score up on stage because, and read and play, which I don't often do. I'm not the world's greatest reader, but it was nice. I wanted to do something that was different. And Gordon said, oh, this is great. And then we sort of worked this guitar arrangement out. And we used to play it every night. And we thought, we'll do it once or twice and people will probably go, oh, no. but everybody really liked it. And I think it was, and so we sort of thought, oh, that's really good. And so when we got to record the record, the record company originally wanted an initial bonus CD for the first, I don't know, couple of thousands that they did.
Right.
And so it was one of the bonus tracks from there.
Right.
And so when it got to the reissue, what I didn't want to do when the option came up for this third disc was just reissue the limited edition 2 CD box set. So I thought, well, anybody that bought that one, there's nothing special for them. So that's why I wanted to do the live album. So that's why I moved that track into the main record.
Right.
So that's why that one's there. That's the same reason actually for why Forgotten King's there, because Gordon and I used to do that on stage as well.
Right.
So that was that one. The one that's really unusual on there. There's 2 others on there actually as well, which I'll just plug quickly. Which is Roots, one of Gordon's original songs from the 70s. We did a rearranged version of that, which I was always really proud that he said he likes it just as much as the original because it's a completely different arrangement.
Yeah.
And the last track is a track called The Wedding Approaches, which was a track from the Tales by Gaslight Dark Fables third CD that some of your listeners may remember from. And it was a track sung beautifully by a girl called Charlotte Dickerson, and Clive did the orchestration on it. But I asked Gordon to do classical guitar on it, and he gave me such a lovely guitar part. One day, we released it and it sounded lovely. And then one day I just had it in my studio. For some reason it loaded up and everything was muted except for the piano and the guitar. And I just played it. And I realized that actually the melodies that Gordon was coming up and the piano melodies that was slightly lost with the song version actually carried the song really nicely. And I said to Gordon, do you mind if I just put that on the record as the bonus track? And he said, no, let's do it. And it just gave us a lovely way of doing doing something that we still work with each other, which is always nice.
Yeah.
Right.
So your dad and brother are the English rock ensemble. Were you unavailable for that gig?
In the nicest sense, in the same way that Dad signs Relayer albums, I wasn't invited, not invited. I think I don't play with Dad very often. Adam does it a lot more than I do, and they've been working together since Adam was about 18. I think Dad started taking Adam out on tour when he was 18. And he often calls on him for second keyboard roles whenever he needs to do something. I mean, I did the O2 with Dad, which was nice to be asked, but I don't court the work, and I've always sort of been stubbornly independent, even though people might find that strange when I've played with Yes and the Strawbs. I think, like I explained to you before, those jobs I was asked to do, I never courted the work, and it doesn't really affect me. It's they've worked together for a long time. I think there's an element of Dad knows that Adam knows a lot of the pieces already because they've been doing it for such a long time, and it's easier to get up and running. So I think that's what it is, really.
That was a deliberately mischievous question. And following on from that, what about some 3 Wakeman concerts? Is that going to happen?
We did do a 4 Wakeman concert actually with my sister Gemma. Which was really good. We've done it a couple of times actually. We've done one with we might have done 2 with all 4 of us. Yeah. And there's been a show with me, Dad, and Gemma. And there's been a show with me, Dad, Gemma, and Adam on a couple of occasions. And I'm just trying to think which one we did. We did this show at the Blackfriars in Gloucester, which was a lovely old building. And we did 2 shows in one night, and we sort of created the set the day before. We sort of all got together, spent the day rehearsing each other's pieces, jumping up and down, doing bits on each other's stuff, working out the jokes that we were going to do. And it literally was that. We had 300, 400 people. They everybody came in. We did the show, and we finished. Took our bows, walked off stage. They asked, everybody walked out, and then the next lot walked in, and we came back in and did the same show again. And I do remember I was touring with Gordon at the time as well, and I remember going to do a show somewhere, and one of the theatre producers came up to me and he said, if you and your dad and your brother and sister would do that show, he said, we could sell you out over the whole country just doing that show the way that. And I thought, but I don't know why it's never really happened. I don't quite know why, because I think we'd all be up for doing it. I mean, and I think it would be a great show to do again.
Yes.
But you never know with Dad. He's sort of strangely eclectic in the way that he does his shows. He's like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. He'll often just phone me up and say, we're going to do a show 3 weeks time. Can you be there? And we're like, okay, great, Dad. And
Yeah.
he'll say, I'll send you some music. And then suddenly you'll just get a disc through the post or a WAV file that's just a load of him stuff in the studio. And you sort of have to just work it out. And then he'll suddenly say, oh, show's not happening. And you go, oh, okay. So it's a bit like that with Dad. And I don't want that to sound like he does things sporadically, because he really doesn't. He puts so much effort and time into what he does.
Yeah.
But he looks for the opportunity and when it would be something different. Because I think what he does, he's so keen not to just do the same thing over and over again that he likes mixing it up a little bit. And I think if he just did the family show over and over and over and over again, it would lose its impact of when we do it. So I think it's like his sort of little, oh, that'd be a really nice thing. We haven't done one of those for a while. So I don't sort of think it's a deliberate reason to not do it. I think it's just that it's one of his, I haven't done that for ages. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that as a one-off. So I think that's really what it is. But they're great fun to do.
Yeah, fantastic. So look forward to that then the next time it comes round.
Yeah.
That'd be great. But for the moment, the Burning Shed, burningshed.com is the place to go to pre-order, as we found out, your collaborations box set, which I have to say has got a lovely cover. Who's done that cover for you?
Oh, you're going to test me now, aren't you? I have to pronounce the gentleman's name correctly, and I will probably pronounce it wrong because I always do. So his actual name is Zinad Nabil.
Oh, right.
But he's known as Sammy. Essentially, what it was for that record cover, I mean, I actually do like it. I was speaking to Carl Groom about it the other day, and I sent him the cover, and he went, oh, that's your best cover yet. And
lovely.
It was very difficult because Three Ages of Magic cover was done by a wonderful artist friend of mine called Anne Sudworth. And the cover for Ravens and Lullabies was done by a young girl called Liliana Sanchez.
Right.
And I found her on an art site, and I chatted to her quite a lot. And her style just matched Ravens and Lullabies. Now, Ravens and Lullabies cover is so different to the Three Ages of Magic cover. It's ludicrous. They couldn't be more different as album covers. And I was desperately trying to find something that would work for the cover that would encompass both records. And I spent a lot of time looking at artist sites because I'm a huge fan of good artwork or digital artwork or paintings. I just love really good art.
Yeah.
And I came across Sammy's image on there, and it looked like that. Everybody always used to think the Three Ages of Magic cover was a painting of me. It wasn't, but it does look a lot like me.
Yeah.
But this picture showed a man still with a long jacket and a hat and a cane. Now, I'm not walking with a cane, but it was the prince look a lot like me.
Yeah.
But this picture showed a man still with a long jacket and a hat and a cane. Now, I'm not walking with a cane, but it was the principle that the time had passed for that same character from that cover. And
right,
the album
yes.
From a Stage, which is the live album on there, there's a piano in the picture as well, which I thought, that covers the live record. And then sat on the piano is a raven. And I thought, I just looked at it and I went, I cannot believe I found a painting that someone has done that has a raven in it, an older version of a man from a different cover, and a piano with sheet music on it falling off the piano. That just... and so I just wrote to him and said, I love your artwork. Would you let me use it for an album sleeve? And he was, we came to an arrangement. But the logo, the Olive Wakeman logo, is done by my good friend Rodney Matthews, and the two just work so well together. But it's a lovely image.
Yeah, it is great. It is great. So yes, get yourselves a copy of this by pre-ordering it on burningshed.com. And just before we let you go, Oliver, I've been enjoying following your son's Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Do you know, he came running into me and goes, they're following me on Instagram.
Well, there you are. I have enjoyed that. And he's certainly developing his skills in that area as well. Very artistic person all the way around.
He's a very talented little lad with his artwork and his piano playing. He's very dedicated to it as well. He puts a lot of time and effort in, which I think is fantastic. Yeah, he doesn't expect to get results immediately, although he will often come into me and he said, Dad, and I said, yes, Arthur, what? He said, you couldn't just phone up Rodney Matthews, could you? Why, Arthur? I just want to understand how he does Sky. How does he do the Sky so well? And I said, look, next time Rodney's round. And I have got a lovely photograph of actually Rodney did come over and sat with Arthur, and Arthur was saying, Rodney said, Arthur said, how do you draw, Rodney? And Rodney said, right, okay, what do you want me to draw? And Arthur was there going, legs of a dinosaur with an elephant's head, but I want it to have wings of a butterfly. And Roger just sat there and drew it, and I will always remember that and think, I wonder if that was, that what might be that little moment that Arthur went, oh, that's really good, and it's it's one of those little special moments that you sort of have, and you sort of go, oh, I'll remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's always a treat to have you on the show, Oliver, and really looking forward to getting myself a copy of Collaborations. So thank you once again.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Well, thank you for inviting me on. I feel like I come on quite a lot. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like having you on, for sure.
Well, it's very kind. Thank you very much.